This is Tyler. Welcome back. So, I figured in this episode, we might as well start at the beginning. What if life truly has no meaning? Why does anything exist at all? These are questions that have haunted humanity for millennia. And during this episode, we'll explore existentialism, science, spirituality to find that footing against nihilism. So, personally, I've struggled with this immensely. Even as young as, let's say, 7. One of the things that I remember from my childhood was looking inside of myself and feeling like there was a massively empty void. It's really kind of hard to describe, but it's essentially like there's an emptiness, like a void inside of myself, and that void was infinitely deep. And if I looked at it, it was like looking into the abyss. And it's been with me for most of my life. And so I guess it drove me to some extent to finally confront that and to come face to face with what I see as nihilism. And so, welcome back on part of this journey, not just for you, but for me, and hopefully as a guide along this journey of stepping through meaning and purpose. So we had to start at the beginning, and we need to define what nihilism is. Not just specifically nihilism, but existential nihilism. Existential nihilism is the position that life has no intrinsic meaning or value. With respect to the universe, existential nihilism posits that a single human or even the entire human species is insignificant, without purpose, and unlikely to change in the totality of existence. In popular use, nihilism now most commonly refers to existential nihilism. And it's got its philosophical roots in Friedrich Nietzsche, who quite honestly impacted a lot of modern society, mainly due to some of his ideas that ended up becoming very prevalent with the way that he interpreted what would be happening in the future after, say, World War I, World War II. And so he has this quote that he makes that God is dead and God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all the world has yet owned, has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off us? What water is there for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred games shall we have to invent? Is not the greatest of this deed too great for us? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? And so many times when people reference this quote, they just reference the God is dead portion of it. It's this really sad hearkening of what Nietzsche observed in the world. When Christianity lost its foothold as the de facto standard of the Western tradition, it was incredibly sad because it provided us with 100% guidance on how to live our lives. And the fact that we exalted science and the pursuit of truth above that led Nietzsche to believe that we had essentially killed God in the Western tradition. And then he had this idea that we needed to then recreate our value structures via the Übermensch. And I think this is where he went wrong, because when we tried to do that, we ended up with some of the most egregious atrocities of World War II. In that, when we embraced ideologies instead of religious traditions, we ended up destroying ourselves and our societies. And it was incredible atrocities at the hands of those ideologies. And so, at the root of all of this is this observation that the universe has no purpose and our lives have no meaning. And then from that, we then recreate our value structures. And we really have to focus on that as the foundational argument, because if we don't go all the way to the root and address that life has intrinsic meaning, then we'll never be able to address all of the things that nihilism attacks us with. Nihilism believes that there is absolutely no objective meaning in life and accepts this as a hopeless reality. So, where I tend to lean is on existentialism. And existentialism argues that individuals can create their own meaning through their choices. And then there's a competing alternate hypothesis, which is absurdism, that focuses on the inherent absurdity of existence while acknowledging that there is human desire for meaning despite its lack in the universe. So essentially, nihilism sees meaninglessness as fact. Existentialism sees it as a challenge to overcome by creating personal meaning, and absurdism sees it as a paradoxical situation to confront and live with. But very specifically in existentialism, I don't believe that it's our job to create our value structures. I think our value structures have been with us this entire time. And in fact, the root of Christianity is the value structure. It's just that it needs to be reinterpreted for modern time. So why is nihilism prevalent in today's world? So we can see it everywhere. As I talked about before, from World War II to the present, we've been trying to reinstitute this religious ideology into us, and every time it takes a root hold, it ends up worse than what we've previously had. And I think this is part of the human condition, that we need some aspect to believe in. We need a belief structure that helps us navigate the world. And the easiest way to do that is by looking at the roots of Christianity as the strongest foundations for how we move forward, but reinterpreting them in a different light. When we see this today, we see this as the decline of religious affiliation. In the US, 29% of adults now identify as nones or no religious affiliation. And that's a dramatic rise from even just 2007, where 16% of the people. So we're moving in a direction where people don't identify with religious affiliations. And in its wake, we're applying other ideologies like wokeism or nationalism, or pick your side in some tribal aspect. And without this shared framework, many people struggle to find a cohesive narrative of meaning. And we're seeing a resurgence of religion as the pendulum is swinging back towards meaning and purpose. But unless we can really address nihilism at the core root, we'll constantly be swinging back between different ideologies that never address the fundamental problem of, is the universe meaningless? Next, we have our impact on scientific understanding. And we have the dominance of materialist perspectives in science, emphasizing randomness and the absence of inherent purpose in the universe. And that contributes to existential doubt. You'll see this with a lot of atheists who just bash everything in religion without actually acknowledging that there are true, good, and beautiful aspects of the religious tendency that the human condition needs to have. Next, we have the loss of grand narratives. In modern society, we don't have these gripping narrative structures that give us the framework and the understanding of how to live our lives. And I attribute a lot of that to postmodernism, in that postmodernism deconstructed universal truths, leading individuals to craft meaning on their own. And I think that's fundamentally wrong. And the reason why it's fundamentally wrong is because certain stories resonate with us. And I believe that they elicit emotional responses, and that the qualia of our emotional response points to the truth associated with those stories. And we're going to get into it a little bit further, but about how the grand narrative structures are actually inherent in the way that our brains operate. Next, we have the responsibility of impossible expectations. I'm looking at you, millennials and Gen Alpha. This is so hard for you in today's day and age. You look at previous generations, and the expectations of what they did and what they went through is now foisted upon your shoulders, and it is totally unfair. And in addition to that, you've got modern news and social media that is constantly throwing into your face all kinds of bad things or all kinds of things that are impossible to live up to. And so, in today's society, especially for our youth, we've got constant exposure to crises through news and social media that amplifies existential anxiety. And that is utterly preposterous. That leads to things like addiction through doom scrolling, where we spend excessive time consuming negative information because it generates more clicks and more shares. And that correlates to higher rates of stress and hopelessness. The need to perform, compete, and succeed in a world without guaranteed stability exacerbates these feelings of inadequacy and despair. The quarter life crisis is emerging because of the uncertainty about identity and purpose and where we need to go in the world. Young people, I see it. And we've got to find a way to make a stand against it. And one of the ways that we can make a stand against it is to come up with a new narrative structure that can address nihilism at its roots. Next, we have the focus on the self and the erosion of community ties. Modern Western societies emphasize personal success and self fulfillment, which can isolate individuals from collective purpose. I see this happening everywhere, where it's all about me in society, rather than us, rather than we, rather than the community that I belong to. And so many people are yearning for finding that community. Viktor Frankl said, when a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. And that's what we're doing. We're doing it in small microcuts of social media, through checking out, through numbing, or through just overall abandoning society. In the US, social isolation affects nearly 25% of adults. Suicide rates have been increasing over the past 2 decades in the US. This is the wrong direction. And it's been an incredible travesty in our modern culture that we need to be addressing. And yet, nobody seems to want to be addressing it because they don't seem to know how. Look at it with veterans. There's at least 4 times as many veterans who die by suicide than by combat in the last several decades. That's utterly ridiculous. And I think a majority of that is driven by the lack of meaning and purpose when veterans come back and integrate themselves into society. So, as I talked about before, if left unaddressed, nihilism leads to despair, bitterness, resentment, and ultimately death, many times through suicide. If we don't address nihilism head on, then we'll continue to see an increase in suffering through loneliness, checking out, numbing, and ultimately suicide. Instead of avoiding the question, perhaps we should use it as an opportunity to find deeper purpose. So next, now that we've addressed and identified where nihilism is and where it exists in our society, let's take a look at the paradox of existence. So the paradox of existence is, why is there something rather than nothing? So it's a philosophical riddle. The simplicity of non-existence is actually easier than existing. Non-existence doesn't need complexity. It doesn't need matter. It doesn't need energy. It doesn't need laws of physics. And so it should be the default state that nothing exists. And yet, something does exist. In fact, you exist. The paradox of existence was described by Ludwig Wittgenstein, who is an Australian philosopher who worked primarily with logic, philosophy of mathematics, and philosophy of the mind. And he said, it's not how things are in the world that's mystical, but that it exists. I really like that. I really like the fact that the mystical nature is in existence itself. Existence seems incredibly improbable, and yet here we are. Why is there a universe when non-existence appears to be more possible? So some philosophical traditions suggest that the question itself is flawed because existence just is. It's the baseline reality we experience. We cannot meaningfully question it because we do exist. It's our natural state of being when we observe ourselves in the world. Now, where does this all come from? And how do we align it with science? So, science gives us the Big Bang Theory, and science traces the origins of the Big Bang approximately 13.8 billion years ago. All matter, energy, and even space time itself emerged from a singularity, a point of infinite density and zero volume. That's incredible. But the key question here is, what caused the Big Bang? Was there truly nothing before it? Or is that a misinterpretation of the theory? Some scientists have tried to resolve this by saying emergence of matter can happen from nothing. They point to quantum physics. Particles can spontaneously appear and annihilate in a vacuum due to quantum fluctuations. I- I'm not arguing against that. It suggests that nothing in a scientific sense is truly empty, but contains the potential for something to emerge. In fact, Lawrence Krauss, in A Universe from Nothing, argues that physical laws can produce universes spontaneously. But does that even make sense? How does something emerge from nothing? Like literally nothing, not quantum fluctuation nothing, and not something as small as quantum mechanics nothing. I think we've gotten way, way, way in front of our skis by speculating that something can come from nothing, especially as big as the Big Bang, and especially as big as the universe. So, this points out limitations in scientific explanations. Science describes the how of existence, but it really struggles with the why. Why do the laws of physics exist themselves? Why is there a universe governed by these laws rather than nothing at all? And why do we find ourselves in this universe in the first place? So, this is where we get to philosophy's take, where the metaphysical arguments come to bear. So, some argue that, that there is necessity of existence. This is saying that existence is necessary. Non existence is not a viable state because there would be nothing to support it. So, Gottfried Leibniz, a German polymath, mathematician, philosopher, and scientist, who's credited along with Isaac Newton for the creation of calculus, posed the ultimate reason for existence must lie in this necessary being, essentially God, as contingent beings require a cause. And if we look at the origination of the universe from the Big Bang all the way through to today, we see a causality. But we also see at the origination of the Big Bang a first mover principle. And so God, according to Leibniz, is the necessary being which constitutes the sufficient explanation of the totality of contingent things. Many people will attempt to speculate to say that that's preposterous, that there is no first mover and that there is no God. But there's no evidence that science can provide us by saying what happened before the Big Bang. There's no evidence that we can point to because we only have our observable universe. And this really does become a metaphysical question. And there is a first mover aspect of this. And that first mover aspect of this, I'm going to plant as saying God exists. But we're going to use other parts of the argument as well. So, David Hume and Bertrand Russell suggested that existence might be a brute fact. It simply just is, and there's no further explanation needed. I tend to agree with them, but I take it one step further that an explanation is needed and it does exist, and that this is one of the fundamental quests of the human experiment, is to seek out and find why we exist. Let's next move to existence as a fundamental aspect. René Descartes is often regarded as the father of modern philosophy, and his exploration of existence is rooted in his quest for certainty amidst doubt. His famous assertion, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, provides a foundational perspective on existence. So what he did was he started with the method of doubt. Descartes began by doubting everything that could possibly be doubted: sensory perception, the existence of the external world, and even mathematical truths. His aim was to strip away all assumptions and find something absolutely certain. And this led him to the evil demon hypothesis. So Descartes imagined a powerful, malicious being deceiving him about everything, including the reality of the world and his own thoughts. This radical skepticism was a thought experiment to question whether anything could withstand doubt. And this is what led him to I think, therefore I am. Even if everything else could be doubted, Descartes realized that one thing was undeniable: the act of doubting itself required a thinker. If we're thinking, doubting, or questioning, then we must exist, at least as a thinking entity. And thus, I think, therefore I am became the first principle of his philosophy. This is the proof of your and my existence. In fact, we can't be certain of anything else in the world except for our own existence. Everything else could be fed to us via simulation, or everything else could be just made up and fed into us. But the fact that we can recognize that there is something shows that we exist. And this is going to be a fundamental aspect of us moving forward in combating nihilism, is the fact that we exist. So this assertion shifts the focus of existence from external reality to the internal reality of thought and consciousness. And for Descartes, existence starts in the mind, the self-aware I, before anything else can be affirmed. And this is where I really like this, is when we look at ourselves and our place in the universe, the improbability of life in the vast, cold expanse of the universe makes me pause. It says, from atoms to consciousness, the incredible journey of complexity evolving from the Big Bang to where we are today is an utter mystery. It is utterly mysterious. Now, we can point to everything along that line and we can say these things happened in causality, moving forward from one step to the next. But look at it. There's an interplay of chaos and order. Existence is neither random nor entirely deterministic, and it follows the arrow of time and causality. And not just that, but we're also causal agents in interacting with our environments in order to shape our futures. So when we look out into the sky, why do we not see a universe which is full of bustling life? Why does it feel like we are uniquely in a position where our life might be the only life in the universe? The miracle of complexity and the miracle of existence is utterly awe-inspiring. Like, awe and wonder is the natural responses to contemplating existence. The fact that we exist is a paradox that cannot be described. It's so hard to understand that we exist in this infinite universe that it is nearly incomprehensible. Now, I want to take a moment and address creationism. And while I find that it's unlikely, I think it's just as likely as emergence from nothing, posited by atheists. There cannot be any proof that existence was brought about 4,000 years ago, just as we cannot prove that existence just didn't happen last Thursday and that some supernatural force created our universe exactly as it is today, with all the things in place spontaneously. In fact, I think it's more probable that the universe was created last Thursday or 4,000 years ago, if you in the slightest bit think that we could be purely a simulation. Now, perhaps we'll address this later in another episode, but for now, I think the most probable explanation is that the universe exists. It's existed for a long time. It probably originated from a finite point. It is incredibly vast, but not infinite. And that we exist due to our ability to think, and we find ourselves in this amazing position of life, looking back at it from existence with awe. In the next segment, let's bridge the science and the spirituality. So science operates as a lens. What science can tell us about the origins of the universe, while it describes how, it often cannot answer why. Science explains the mechanisms, not the purpose. Science excels at describing how processes unfold, how stars form, how galaxies evolve, how life emerges, how life evolves. However, science doesn't inherently address why these processes occur. in the grander metaphysical sense, nor has it been great for telling us what to value or what to do with our lives. And so we have these boundaries of empirical evidence. We have the observable universe, where science relies on empirical evidence, but we're limited to what we can observe or infer. Concepts like the multiverse or string theory may never be testable, pushing them more into the philosophical realm than into science's realm. Because science needs to be testable. It needs to have that how. It needs to have that reproducibility. And it very many times doesn't address that why. And that why is that underlying fundamental need within each of us to understand our place and how we can contribute. The observable universe has boundaries beyond which we cannot see, leaving those fundamental questions unanswered. So philosophical questions move beyond science. Why does the universe exist rather than nothing? What are the laws of physics? Why are the laws of physics as they are? Could they be different? What, if anything, existed before the Big Bang? These questions push beyond the scope of scientific inquiry into the realm of metaphysics, philosophy, and theology. While science provides foundation and insights into the mechanisms of the universe, it has not provided as of yet meaning or purpose to existence. Human beings, on the other hand, as narrative and meaning-seeking creatures, turn to philosophy, storytelling, and spirituality to fill those gaps left by the scientific explanation. And we see this through the history of humanity. Science is used as a tool. We use science to illuminate how the universe origins happened. It offers awe-inspiring insights into the mechanics of existence, such as quantum phenomena and the vastness of the cosmos. But philosophy provides us as a guide. It addresses the why by exploring questions of purpose, existence, and meaning. Philosophy complements science by asking questions that are profoundly human and matter to us based upon the inner longings of ourselves to be part of something greater. So, a holistic perspective brings together both science and philosophy to provide a richer understanding of our place in the universe, acknowledging that both mechanisms govern it and the deeper questions of meaning. Let's move to storytelling. Our brains are hardwired for stories. In fact, the human brain processes and remembers information more effectively when it is presented in narrative form. That's just a fact of how our brains work. Stories provide structure, causality, and emotional resonance, helping us make sense of complex and chaotic experiences, while also reducing anxiety and existential dread. Neuroscience shows us that the default mode network of the brain, active during introspection, is heavily involved in constructing and processing narratives as a fundamental way that our brain works. This mechanism allows us to create coherent stories about our lives and our place in the world. Storytelling is nearly foundational to the human condition. It's a fundamental aspect of how we operate in the world. Let's next look at evolutionary roots of meaning seeking. Early humans depended on cooperation and shared understanding to survive. We have shared narratives. These are myths and beliefs that united groups, establishing trust and collective goals. Purpose and meaning served as psychological tools for survival, motivating individuals to endure hardship, protect kin, and contribute to their communities and tribes. Evolution favored those who could ascribe purpose to their actions, as it fostered persistence, innovation, and group cohesion in the face of adversity. But there's more. The necessity of making sense of suffering. And this is something that Christianity really struggled with, that nihilism very immediately addresses. And that is the problem of pain. But within that, we see in Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning that humans can endure great suffering if they perceive life as meaningful, making a conscious choice of life versus death. Viktor Frankl said, "Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in a given set of circumstances, to choose one's way." Conversely, A lack of meaning and movement away from life often leads to despair, apathy, and death. Life is filled with uncertainty, loss, and pain. Constructing narratives about these experiences allows us to contextualize suffering, transforming it into something that can be integrated into a broader understanding of existence and has its roots in our evolutionary history. Next, let's look at purpose as a compass for action. Seeking meaning provides direction and motivation. Without it, we're left adrift, facing existential inertia and nihilism. Purpose serves as a decision making heuristic, helping us prioritize goals and align actions with the perceived greater good and value hierarchy. Finally, let's address the role of narrative in identity formation. Personal identity is deeply tied to the stories we tell ourselves about who we are, where we come from, and where we're going. These narratives are crucial for self understanding and for navigating social relationships. Identity narratives also help us reconcile conflicting desires, beliefs, or past experiences, integrating them into a cohesive concept of the self to aid against anxiety. Now let's move to shared myths and archetypes as tools for making sense of existence. So, what are shared myths? Shared myths are collective narratives that offer frameworks for understanding the world, society, and human nature. They're not merely fictional tales, but repositories of cultural wisdom and values passed on and updated for each generation they are told. For example, we have creation myths, like the story of Genesis in the Bible. We have hero myths, like Odysseus. And we have moral fables, like the tortoise and the hare. And we resonate with these collective narratives because they help us understand everything about our world and the worlds that we come into. But they constantly need to be reinterpreted as our societies evolve. Within these stories are archetypes as universal patterns. And these archetypes emerge throughout historical narrative and act as recurring symbols and motifs in human storytelling, as embedded metastructures inside of culture. For example, the hero's journey. The hero embarks on a transformative journey. This is like Luke Skywalker or Frodo of the Shire. Then we have the mentor, who guides the hero. This is like Yoda or Gandalf. And then we have the shadow, which represents the darker aspects of the self and is typically associated with the bad guy, either Darth Vader or Sauron. And these archetypes resonate across cultures because they tap into universal human experiences, and they offer relatable models for personal and societal struggles. The shared myths provide a cosmic narrative, answering questions like, why are we here? What is our purpose? What happens after death? These stories give individuals a sense of belonging and situate them within a larger context, reducing existential anxiety and our innate fear of death. Shared myths create a sense of collective identity, enabling large groups of people to cooperate, whether those are national myths or religious doctrines. Myths encode cultural norms, values, and lessons, passing them to future generations. Archetypes and myths offer the blueprints for navigating life's challenges, such as the hero's journey, as a metaphor for personal growth. In contemporary times, traditional myths are often replaced or supplemented by secular stories, whether that's scientific narratives, political ideologies, popular media, or modern myths like the pursuit of technological progress. So this brings us to the central paradox. Humans are meaning-seeking creatures in what appears to be a meaningless universe. And while it may seem that the universe lacks inherent meaning, humans cannot help but seek it. This paradox is both a source of existential anxiety and a driver of creativity, resilience, and cultural evolution. Shared myths and archetypes help resolve this tension by offering frameworks and scaffolding for meaning that transcends individual and collective experience, connecting us to something larger than ourselves and a broader story to participate in. By understanding ourselves as narrative beings, we can appreciate the profound role of stories, myths, and archetypes in making sense of existence and creating purpose in our lives. So, spirituality acts as a complementary lens to science. Humanity has long turned to spiritual and religious frameworks to address the profound question of existence. These traditions, while diverse, share common purpose to provide meaning, structure, and a narrative for life in the cosmos. Here's some key perspectives. We've got creation myths, bringing order out of chaos. These are traditionally associated with areas like Abrahamic traditions in Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, and Genesis as the divine creation story. In Genesis, it describes God creating the universe out of nothing, assigning humanity a special role as caretakers of creation. This narrative emphasizes divine intention, purpose, and the belief that existence is deliberately an act by an all-powerful creator. This story is great for true believers, as it absolves one of all existential dread, providing structure and order for everything we observe in the world. It provides an all-knowing, all-powerful, all-loving God, and it provides the framework upon which we need to act. Similar to the Bible, the Quran describes Allah as the ultimate creator, framing existence as a reflection of divine will and emphasizing submission to that will. In other aspects of creation stories, we experience emergence from chaos or nature, and many indigenous traditions describe existence as emerging from primordial chaos or the void, often brought into order by a god, ancestor, or nature spirit. For example, in the Hopi creation myth, the spider grandmother and other deities guide humanity from one world to the next, symbolizing cyclical renewal, or any other number of ancient myths from Native Americans or ancient Mesopotamians. These myths often emphasize humanity's connection to the natural world, framing existence as part of a living web of interdependence. Next, we have the cyclical views of existence. These are things like Hinduism, Buddhism, and Taoism, where each provides some cyclical structure that enables the universe to go through endless cycles of creation, preservation, and destruction, ultimately transcending into a cycle of rebirth in a greater spiritual journey. Each one has slightly different takes on this, emphasizing impermanence and interdependence, or life is seen as a cycle of suffering, but the ultimate goal of breaking through that suffering through enlightenment, or in Taoism's case, by viewing existence as dynamic and cyclical, emphasizing balance and effortless action. But these are the traditional cases. In modern spirituality, what I've seen is humans' attempts to grapple with the unanswerable by using spirituality without the dogma. And so, for those who aren't interested in organized religion, spirituality can serve as a way to reflect on existence through mindfulness, meditation, or philosophical inquiry. Practices like yoga or Stoic contemplation allow individuals to engage with existential questions without adhering to specific doctrines or without needing to have black and white religious guidelines. So, spiritual traditions, diverse as they are, serve as humanity's attempt to grapple with the mystery of existence. They provide frameworks for meaning, purpose, and connection in a world that often feels overwhelming. Whether viewed through the lens of divine creation, cyclical renewal, or philosophical inquiry, these traditions underscore a shared yearning to understand why there is something rather than nothing, and what our role might be within it, and how those traditions can help soothe anxiety. Next, we're going to come back to the narrative structure that ties science and spirituality. I admit, when I started looking into this and started questioning it, I came up with a series of ideas. And then what I found was that someone else had already gone through and discovered these ideas before me. And so I want to introduce you to Teilhard de Chardin and his idea that humanity creating God as the ultimate conscious entity. All right, Teilhard de Chardin was a Jesuit priest, paleontologist, and philosopher who approached existence in humanity's purpose through a unique blend of science, spirituality, and metaphysics. His ideas revolve around the evolutionary process as a divine journey culminating in the unification of consciousness and existence in what he termed the omega point. And while his ideas were way ahead of his time, he was never excommunicated from the church, so there stands a position upon which his ideas could integrate a greater good for everyone. So his ideas come about through evolution as a cosmic process. The universe is becoming, it's not static. Teilhard saw existence as dynamic, an ongoing process of evolution that extends beyond the physical world and into consciousness and the spirit. The progression of the universe isn't random but purposeful. It's driven by increasing complexity and consciousness. Teilhard believed that as matter evolves, it organizes itself into increasingly complex forms. For example, from atoms to molecules, from molecules to cells, from cells to organisms, and from simple organisms into complex organisms. This complexity leads to consciousness, particularly evident in humans. Next, he addresses consciousness as key to existence. Teilhard argued that humans represent a critical point in evolution because of our ability to reflect on our own existence. And as we talked about before with René Descartes, that's the one thing that we can absolutely be sure of. Self-awareness is the marker of the universe becoming conscious of itself. And we are a part of that, and we play a story in that. He proposed this concept of the new sphere, a layer of collective human thought and consciousness that surrounds the Earth, much like the biosphere, but this new sphere evolves as humans connect through knowledge, culture, and technology, pushing evolution beyond biology and into the realm of ideas and spirit. So how does spirituality play into this? Teilhard rejected Cartesian dualism of matter and spirit. He viewed them as two aspects of the same reality, intricately linked. Spirituality isn't separate from evolution. It's part of the same process, driving existence towards ultimate fulfillment. He also saw God as the prime mover. He saw God as immanent within the evolutionary process, not just an external creator, but a divine eternal force, pulling creation towards greater unity and complexity. And this culminates with his idea of the omega point, the goal of existence. The ultimate goal of evolution, where all consciousness converges into a unified divine entity. At this point, individuality and the collective are harmonized, and existence transcends physical limitations. Teilhard's omega point aligns with Christian eschatology, or the study of the end times, but it's framed through the lens of an evolutionary theory. He believed that the omega point representing the final unification of all existence in divine love and consciousness. So why is this important? Teilhard viewed humans as active participants in evolution. Through our creativity, knowledge, and spirituality, we contribute to the progression towards the omega point. This role comes with responsibility to align our actions to the greater good and the evolutionary trajectory. It gives us the ability to choose and to shape our future. It gives us the ability to participate in the emergence of the universe, and it gives us the ability to further unite with God as we're walking towards the omega point. He saw love not just as an emotion, but as a fundamental driving force, the unification and evolution of consciousness. Love binds individuals together, creating a network of relationships that advance humanity towards the divine. And in the same way that it reflects the relationship in God and the Trinity, it also has the ability to reflect the network of relationships that bind us all together. So how does this challenge nihilism? Teilhard's philosophy directly counters nihilism by proposing a grand cosmic purpose for existence. He argued that life isn't accidental or meaninglessness, but part of a divinely orchestrated plan moving towards ultimate unity. That is incredible. By framing existence as an evolutionary journey with a spiritual goal, Teilhard offers hope and meaning, even amidst suffering and uncertainty. And this is one of those incredible abilities to address the fundamental problem with nihilism. When nihilism says that there is nothing and there is no purpose, we've walked through a series of steps that points us towards that being false. Whether that's through observing science itself, whether that's through understanding that we exist, whether that's through understanding that we are inherently narrative-based creatures who use stories in order to shape our environments, and that we can use that overall framework in order to craft a story that enables us to pursue a life well lived and to pursue a life that leads us towards God. In fact, not just that leads us towards God, but leads us to ultimate fulfillment with God. I think it's incredible that we can take these various different aspects that have been established throughout history and combine them together that enables us hope and meaning even amidst suffering and uncertainty. There are some people who are going to criticize Teilhard's ideas as overly speculative, blending science and theology in ways that lack empirical rigor. His concept, like the omega point, has been seen as idealistic and simple. But that's what I like about it. It's a narrative story that actually combats the anti-story of nihilism. It's a strong enough story that can provide meaning and purpose and structure into the universe with the fact that we exist and the fact that we participate in the universe. Ideas are increasingly relevant in discussions around artificial intelligence, collective consciousness, and the intersection of science and spirituality. His vision of the new sphere parallels today's interconnected digital world where humanity shares knowledge and ideas on a global scale, especially with the advent of AI. Teilhard reframes existence not as a static state, but as a journey of becoming, deeply tied to both matter and spirit, and that we play a causal role in the unfolding of the future of potential, no matter how small. This perspective shifts focus from individual survival to collective progress, unity, and purpose. It's our call to action. Teilhard's ideas encourage humanity to take an active role in advancing evolution, fostering love, collaboration, and a sense of shared purpose. So his philosophy offers a profound integrated view of existence, merging science and spirituality into a cohesive narrative. By positioning humanity within a cosmic process of evolution towards unity and divine fulfillment, he challenges nihilism and inspires a sense of purpose rooted in the very fabric of existence. So, why does this matter? When we're observing the impact of confronting existence on individual well being, facing nihilism doesn't have to lead to despair. It can lead to empowerment and awe, as there's an overwhelming case against existence, and yet we still exist. But we also have to address another aspect, which is remaining hidden right in front of us. How can we be sure that existence is good? Albert Camus, one of the leading existential philosophers of the 20th century, grappled with this profound question of whether life is better than not life. He framed this dilemma through the lens of the absurd, a concept that captures the conflict between humanity's search for meaning and the apparent lack of inherent meaning in the universe. This exploration led him to what he called the only serious philosophical problem: suicide. We're going to explore why Camus is wrong and why existence shows us that life actually has meaning. So, how did Camus define the absurd? Humans, as we talked about before, have an innate drive to find purpose and coherence in their existence. The universe, however, appears silent, chaotic, and devoid of ultimate answers to our questions. The clash between these two realities, the human yearning for meaning and the universe's indifference, creates what Camus defines as the absurd. He argued that the absurd is not something external to us. It's born from our relationship with the world and the universe, and it cannot be resolved by either one, denying the human need for condition, or two, imposing false meaning onto the universe through religion or ideology. Instead, he asserts we must confront it head on. And this leads to his fundamental question: to live or not to live? Camus believed that suicide was the ultimate philosophical question because it asks whether life, given its absurdity, is worth living at all. The absurd places us on a state of existential tension, forcing us to choose between two extremes. We either embrace the absurd, acknowledging life's lack of inherent meaning while continuing to live and to create our own purpose, or to reject the absurd, concluding that life's lack of meaning renders it unbearable and choosing to end it in suicide. So Camus' answer is rebellion and defiance. He rejects suicide, both philosophical and physical. He viewed it as a surrender to despair, an abdication of the human spirit, but with a bit of stoicism mixed into it. He instead chooses to rebel. So instead of yielding to nihilism, he advocates to accept the absurd, that life has no ultimate meaning or purpose, but that this realization can be liberating rather than paralyzing. And he says that humans have the power to define their own values, goals, and joys in faceless meaning. One of the really interesting writings of Camus that I really like is The Myth of Sisyphus, which is a metaphor for our own lives. So he used the Greek myth of Sisyphus as a metaphor for the human condition. Sisyphus was condemned by the gods to roll a boulder up a hill, only for it to roll back down for eternity. Every day, Sisyphus has to roll the bowl up the hill and back down the other side. Every day. But what's interesting about Camus' interpretation is that he says that we need to look at Sisyphus's endless labor as the absurdity of life, but to see Sisyphus as being happy. By embracing the act of rolling the boulder rather than fixating on the futility of the task, Sisyphus reclaimed his agency. His defiance in continuing the task transforms his punishment into a statement of human resilience. This is what we're called to. But we're not called to it just out of spite. We're called to it because we're called to a greater purpose. We're called to it because we are yearning to reunite with God. We are yearning to find a greater purpose for our lives. And this is where life versus not life and Camus' perspective comes together. Even in an absurd world, moments of joy, beauty, and connection make life worth living. The absence of inherent meaning, according to Camus, grants us the freedom to define our own existence. And the rebellion acts as fulfillment, defying despair and asserting our humanity becomes a source of dignity and purpose. Now that's pretty compelling, and I understand why a lot of people like Camus and his argument of the absurd. But he's wrong. And here's why. When we look at framing life as inherently absurd, Camus dismisses life's broader role in the cosmos. Life can be understood as a force that resists entropy and chaos, creating order and complexity and ultimately love and consciousness. This view situates humanity in a cosmic narrative where participating in life's creative and constructive processes is itself a meaningful act against entropy. This is the key difference. Where Camus saw just the absurd, what I see is an epic and adventurous call for us to become greater and to provide the world with life. My core argument is in the will to life, and that we are called, in fact, we're designed in order to become better, to grow, to produce, to be creative, to make the world a better place. And that when we do those things, we make the world better and we shape the universe as it moves forward. And that brings us closer to God. And this cosmic narrative, where we participate in life's creative and constructive processes, is that meaningful act against entropy. Camus isolates human consciousness from the evolutionary process, focusing on its existential dilemmas rather than its continuity in life's broader trajectory and that arrow of time and causality, as we talked about before. Humans are part of an ongoing experiment in complexity and resilience, which offers purpose beyond the immediate absurdity of experience. If you look at the broader cosmic narrative, we are so incredibly lucky to exist when the cosmic universe around us appears to be lifeless. As we talked about before, it is so incredible that you exist. The odds of that happening are so small that it is nearly incomprehensible. Next, Camus rejects traditional spirituality as a source of meaning, seeing it as a form of philosophical suicide that denies the absurd. However, spirituality is more aptly defined as the search for connection, transcendence, and participation in something greater than oneself. It does not require denial of the absurd, but rather an embrace of wonder and mystery and existence. And as Teilhard de Chardin argued, humanity is evolving towards greater complexity and consciousness, contributing to the omega point. This process gives life purpose as part of a cosmic trajectory towards unity and transcendence. This is life's grand experiment. When life is viewed as part of the universe's grand experiment against entropy, the absurd becomes less of a dilemma and more of an invitation. It's an invitation to a greater part of the story. Humanity's ability to create order, knowledge, and beauty transforms existence from absurdity into participation in a cosmic drama. Existence is so rare and so precious. Life's rarity in the universe underscores its value. The fact that humans can ponder their own existence is not evidence of absurdity. It's evidence of extraordinary potential. So, in this journey we've embarked upon, we began with the weighty question of why anything exists at all, evolving through the challenges posed by nihilism, which are enormous. The paradoxes of existence and the tension between science and spirituality. We've grappled with humans' inherent desire for meaning in a universe that often appears indifferent. But within this indifference lies an opportunity. It's a call to action. Far from being a hopeless endeavor, the search for meaning allows us to transcend nihilism, embrace awe, and see our lives as part of a larger narrative. Whether through science, spirituality, or stories we tell ourselves, we find that existence is not just a fact, it's a miracle, a rare and precious state that asks us, no, compels us to rise above despair and participate fully in life. So, what are our key takeaways? First, challenge of nihilism. Nihilism, particularly existential nihilism, posits that life has no inherent meaning or value. It has become more prevalent in today's world due to the decline of shared narratives like religion, the limits of scientific explanations, and societal pressures that exacerbates feelings of isolation and purposelessness. Confronting nihilism is essential because, as unchecked, it leads to despair, apathy, and disconnection. Number 2, why is there something rather than nothing? Existence is both improbable and awe-inspiring, challenging us to understand the origins of the universe. Science explains the how, while philosophy and spirituality explore the why. Philosophers like Descartes And thinkers like Chardin offer frameworks to anchor existence in consciousness, complexity, and cosmic purpose. Number 3, human drive for meaning. Humans are narrative beings, hardwired to seek purpose and tell stories to make sense of the world. Myths, archetypes, and spiritual traditions help us contextualize existence, offering frameworks for belonging, resilience, and creativity forged through evolutionary and cultural traditions. Number 4, why life is better than not life. Albert Camus framed life as absurd, but ultimately worth living through rebellion and defiance of despair. While his ideas inspire resilience, they miss the broader cosmic narrative. Life can be seen as a grand battle against entropy, a cosmic experiment in growth against emptiness through truth, love, and consciousness. And finally, number 5. Science illuminates the mechanics of the universe, while spirituality provides the scaffolding for understanding its deeper mysteries. Together, they offer a holistic lens for grappling with existence. Life is an invitation. It's a call to participate in a grand drama of existence, to create, to connect, and to seek. While the universe may not hand us meaning on a silver platter, it gives us the capacity to find it through our relationships, our struggles, and our triumphs, even in our suffering. In this cosmic experiment, where we resist entropy and forge order, our existence is not trivial. It's an act of rebellion, a celebration of possibility, and a profound statement to the miracle of being. As we continue this journey together, let's remember the question of meaning is not a burden to bear, but a canvas to fill. With that, stay curious, stay inspired, and let's keep exploring.